All right, there we go. There we go. All
There
right.
we go.
All right. Hi guys. We're
Hi.
back in our second record. This is our third episode, but our second recording session.
Yep.
So it's been a week. We've each been doing our own little things. So Andrea, what did you think of the first recording session?
I think it went well. I think it went
Yeah.
well. I just like to preface for the audience, this isn't like notes noted out. There's no outline to these episodes. We just say, hey, we're talking about horror movies, and then just start talking. So,
Right. Like this is very much very off the cuff. I will let you
and-
know though, I did rewatch the first musical episode before this one, and I will let you know there are parts in that where I sound extremely pompous. And so for the first time in some like the hot takes history, I will be doing an apology. So Andrea, can you just do some like acapella like piano, sad piano background?
yes.
I go ahead. All right. Hi guys. I'm so sorry that I called Sound of Music, and I quote, a charming enough movie. I really didn't mean it like that. I like Sound of Music a lot. I just, you guys misunderstand my vision. What are we doing?
I know you guys can't see my face right now.
You know what? That's called taking accountability. That's good. You know what? Take notes. Take notes, other podcasters. This
Yes.
podcast
This is
may not have an audience, but god damn it, it's got soul. It's got heart. You
No,
got,
I was listening. I said "but like" at least 50 times, and I'm there like, I'm doing it again. I need to stop saying "but like," and that
It's
is my
okay.
goal. That is my goal.
Okay, it's okay. It's fine. We're the underdogs. Go Mighty Ducks. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna be, it's gonna be good. All right, welcome back. All right, so Andrea, what is it we're talking about today?
Mel Brooks.
We're talking about Mel Brooks.
Good to be Mel Brooks.
It's good to be Mel Brooks. It's good to be the king. So we're both pretty big Mel Brooks fans,
Mhm.
as I think anyone who's ever had a father ever, I think.
And
Generally,
you've probably seen some sort of Spaceballs merch in your lifetime. I guarantee it.
you've had a father who has said they don't make movies like Blazing Saddles anymore,
Yes.
and they're kind of right. They're kind of
You're
correct.
kind of. I don't know if he would get away with half the jokes anymore.
Right, but we'll be getting into that in this
Mhm.
episode. So, Andrea, what's your relationship with Mel Brooks?
You know, my friend Gavin here is a much bigger fan of Mel Brooks than I am, but don't get me wrong, I love a good Mel Brooks movie. My first introduction to him was Spaceballs, of course. I
Right,
got my entire English class to watch it one year, and I have never felt more accomplished.
lit.
And then I watched Young Frankenstein or Young Frankenstein. I always do the first pronunciation. And I saw a lot of his parody movies, and then for this podcast, I watched 12 Chairs, which was definitely interesting to see his earlier films. But I love a good Mel Brooks movie. Dude's still kicking around at like 92 and
90,
so
90s,
much
like late 90s, man.
late 90s.
Late 90s. He's almost
Oh
100.
my gosh, I have so much respect for him. As he is loaded for life, but he's like, nah, I'm gonna still keep making more movies.
Righto.
Like, fair enough. Okay, respect.
Right. So, my relationship to Mel Brooks kind of started like most people's did, where just their father showed them Spaceballs, which I like Spaceballs.
Yeah.
I think that might have been my first one.
I think it's everyone's introduction.
Everyone's first one is Spaceballs because, people recognize Star Wars. And I think what's interesting about Mel is, as someone who loves Mel, like, listen, I don't have it out right now, but I actually have, my camera's not on, obviously, but I actually have a record collection of a lot of comedy albums. And one of the first ones I ever bought was the 2,000-Year-Old Man with Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner.
Nice.
What that was is Carl Reiner, who you might know from Ocean's 11 as Saul, the old guy. And basically all they used to do was Carl Reiner would be like, so 2,000-Year-Old Man, did you ever know Jesus? And then Mel Brooks would go, yeah, they used to come into the shop all the time with his apostles. They'd always walk around, never buy anything. They would just riff like that. And that was my introduction to him after Spaceballs. And from there, I kind of got interested. And then when I started getting into movies, one of the first things I ever got was my mother. I believe it was my mother. My mother gave me, for my birthday, a collection of Mel Brooks movies
Nice.
on DVD. And that was my first introduction to a lot of tropes. And I think that's what's really important about Mel Brooks,
Mhm.
particularly as a film podcast. We're here to look at him primarily as a filmmaker. And I do think watching a lot of those movies, and especially 12 Chairs, which I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit, which is my personal favorite of his movies, for a couple of reasons. You see a level of understanding in film tropes through his movies, which I think makes him a really great parody artist, because you can tell with affection that more than most, he actually loves a lot of the stuff. Like
Absolutely.
Young Frankenstein, which you're gonna call it Frankenstein. I'm gonna say Frankenstein.
That's my personal favorite, Mel Brooks.
Right. And that movie is so affectionate towards Universal monster movies, but we'll get
and the original, and it's skipping ahead of my own. It is like the most respectful and somehow most accurate Frankenstein adaptation ever.
Because you're a huge Mary Shelley fan.
Oh, absolutely. A little bit about me. My kind of filmmaker pipe dream, if I were ever to make it big as a director, I want to be the first woman to actually adapt Frankenstein according to Mary Shelley's original work. I have a bone to pick with Kenneth Branagh.
We all do. Anyone who wants to start.
And I'm kind of nervous for the Del Toro one, but I have a little bit more faith in Del Toro. But that's kind of my goal. So it's like, how the heck he's obviously a very well-read and well-educated man, and you have to be to do comedy, but how does a parody filmmaker create the best adaptation of Frankenstein ever, in my opinion?
So that's something I think would be fun to get into. So Mel got his start originally, because I read a whole autobiography about Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks started out, he lived in New York. He started writing for Sid Caesar, which is a television show that had a bunch of different writers on it, like Neil Simon and Larry Gelbart, people like that. Afterwards, he ended up touring around with Carl, and then he wrote the script for his first movie, which was The Producers.
Oh, I love I forgot, for some reason I forgot that was a Mel Brooks movie.
That is his first.
I love that movie.
I'd argue The Producers is his thesis.
Yeah.
It is a thesis. So for anyone who's never seen The Producers and has never seen the musical adaptation of The Producers with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, the movie, which stars Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, they both they're both theater producers, and they both operate under the idea that they're never going to succeed. And then eventually they learn that, and I forget specifically like the way in which to do it, but point is, if they have investors invest a bunch of money into a musical and then no one goes to see it, they keep all the money. They don't owe anyone anything back. So then they decide, what is the worst musical we can ever perform that no one can go to? And they decide that they're going to hire a Nazi playwright to write a play. But here's what's interesting. What's interesting about the film is Mel Brooks actually is a war veteran. He actually went to war in World War II. There's a famous story in which during several days at war, he would sing really loudly
I've heard that story.
To annoy the enemy front. But,
I mean, be petty. Petty icon right there.
Incredible. And what I love about Mel is the joke is never on the people suffering. It's always on the way that fascism is portrayed. Like, for example, there's a scene in this analysis I think owes a lot to Lindsay Ellis's video about The Producers, which if you haven't seen is a really marvelous video about The Producers. She talks about how there's a scene in which during the Springtime for Hitler number, which is literally what the number is called, where the camera appears overhead. We're gonna get that song
in my head. It's in my head now. I apologize to our viewers.
And they spin around in a formation that looks like a swastika. What I love about that is that they make it look cheesy and cornball, which is a perfect emblematic thing for how ridiculous fascism looks. And it's really, really funny. And I feel like that one has maybe some down parts, but it's all made up for in Gene Wilder. And I think you would agree
No, Gene Wilder is one of my favorite actors of the era. I love Gene Wilder.
Love Gene. So I guess we start there, and then we get to all the other ones. So I guess the interesting way we wanted to put this one, at least this episode, is we both have different favorite Mel Brookses. So I guess my question to you is, what are your top three? And I'll give you mine.
All right, well, my top three are Young Frankenstein, and I'm going to interchange them from this point on. Young Frankenstein. Ooh. Producers is top three, but I don't know if it's second or third. And then I'm gonna say Robin Hood Men in Tights. I know it's not a lot of people's favorites. I know it's not. But I love Robin Hood, okay? I love Oh, what's
Wasn't the name of the guy Carrie Ellis? Is his
Carrie?
name?
Yeah, Gary Ellis. He's one of my favorite actors. And the way
He should
he
be in more stuff.
delivers the lines, that movie proves how broken my sense of humor is.
Like, there's a glory in the inconsistency of Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Exactly.
I watched that on a Florida vacation with my father, and that was great because there's some jokes in that I think are a little cheap, but there are just some basic things that will make me laugh. And mine is the fact that the dimple moves every single. So the main villain has like a little dimple on his cheek, and then that
it
dimple
moves
every
single scene.
And then sometimes it's in the funniest way, it's in his forehead or whatever. It's great.
And then one character calls attention to it, and he's just like, never mind.
Which, to be fair, I do think that joke is a less funny repeat of the joke in Young Frankenstein, where it's like, it wasn't your hump over there. What hump?
What?
Like
what hump? Like there.
Which,
I mean,
that's a sign of Mel Brooks maybe repeating himself, but whatever. He's Mel Brooks.
It's Mel Brooks. He deserves it.
Shut up. Whatever. So what's your third?
So I think probably it'd be Young Frankenstein, producers, Men in Tights.
Oh, no Spaceballs.
I love Spaceballs, don't get me wrong. But I feel like you have to... I feel like it's just kind of been oversaturated in the media a little bit. And me being the rebellious punk little film student, I'm like, it's too mainstream! And
all right.
Don't get me wrong, I still love it.
Speaking of snob who's overly against the mainstream, here's my top 3. Number 3, I would probably say Blazing Saddles. That one.
I feel like that's a lot of people consider it his magnum opus.
His magnum opus has a lot of great scenes.
Oh, I forgot about History of the World.
Oh, that's good. We'll get to that.
Okay.
I have a couple of thoughts on.
I'm keeping my ranking. I'm so sorry.
Right.
Keep going.
All right. So, Blazing Saddles, which is arguably his funniest, maybe the one with the most jokes. Blazing Saddles. I'll explain before I move on. I think the reason why Blazing Saddles for me is third is because while it is the funniest, I do think personally, the humor of it, it's not that it ages poorly. It actually ages better than you think it is going to. Watch it. It's that I feel like with repeat viewings, the jokes don't necessarily get funnier. I think that first time, everything hits you and it's still funny, but the shock of the ending, which I guess spoilers, whatever, you're watching this podcast, it's your fault you haven't seen Blazing Saddles. It's fine.
It's like the Sixth Sense rule.
Yeah, it's Sixth Sense rule. Bruce Willis, whatever. We're just gonna say that every single time we bring up Sixth Sense, we just have to go Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Bruce
Willis.
But it ends with basically a big fight that leads to them actually breaking through the film and just being on the Warner Bros. Backlot, which just comes out of nowhere and it takes you by surprise the first time you see it, which I think is still funny. It never stops being funny, but
that's kind of how Spaceballs is. Like, it's funny the first time you see it, and it's still funny when you rewatch it, but there's just something about like the first viewing.
Right. The surprise is gone. Surprise is gone. Number 2, Young Frankenstein. That to me is, I think I would agree with you, maybe on a filmmaking level, his best. Flat out.
On a technical level, I think.
His best movie.
Yes.
Just incredibly inventive. And we'll talk about that more when we debate which one's probably the best. And my number 1 is 12 Chairs, which I would argue is his best on a story level. So what did you think of 12 Chairs?
Honestly, I had mixed feelings about it. Question: when did 12 Chairs come out?
1970, right after the producers.
Okay, because I got heavy Monty Python vibe, especially when like they had that one animated scene. It felt like I was watching a Monty Python movie over a Mel Brooks movie. And like granted, it was still a really good movie. And the old aristocrat really got on my nerves. I'm sorry, he did. Like, okay, I understand you want to find the jewels, and you're corrupted by greed, which is kind of the point of the movie. But he really, like, what was his name? What was the con man's name?
I forget. With Frank Langella. I know Frank Langella. The ladies' man. I know him primarily as Frank Langella, Dom DeLuise, and Ron Moody, who, by the way, is Oliver. Have you seen Oliver?
No.
The guy who plays Fagin in the 60s Oliver movie is the aristocrat.
Okay. But whatever, like the con artist was pulling that movie.
Oh, he was the one driving the plot. I would agree with you there.
And that's, I think, my main, not issue with it, 'cause it's still a great movie. but it's the aristocrat is the one who primarily wants the jewels because of like he survived the Russian Revolution, and I mean, as a fan of like Russian literature, Russian history, I appreciate all the homages to Russian history and Russian literature. But as if he is the one who primarily wants the jewels for his own like redemption post-revolution, why does the plot rely on the guy who's just there for the paycheck?
That's a really good point. I guess before I begin, we should actually talk about what the movie's about.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
So the movie is based on an old novel, which actually is an adaptation, which is interesting. But the film basically has the basic idea that there are 12 chairs that were from an inheritance. One of the chairs has a bag of jewels inside of them, and they're all across Russia. So on the prowl is Ron Moody, who's the aristocrat, which is so funny. When I first watched this movie, it's like, oh, he's kind of normal. And then the second money gets into it, he's just like crazed, which is the craziest. Ron, and he's great. I think his acting is really good. Frank Langella is so good in this. He's such an, excuse my French, such an asshole. Like he just is such a conniving, This movie maybe has some of my favorite characters in the Mel Brooks movie, and my favorite, flat out, is Dom DeLuise as the corrupt priest, who just
gosh,
so funny.
Oh my gosh, and he gets that scene that did crack me up when he poses like the Commissar of chair.
That's great.
There were a couple moments that really did crack me up. And again, it kind of proves how broken my sense of humor is when this guy gets hit with like this one coat rack like 3 times, and then the walls to the flat fall down. I don't know why, but those had me laughing so hard. Anyways.
On the contrary, I think that stuff's beautiful. And, Three Stooges should be praised. Like,
it was very
Gilbert and Sullivan, Yeah.
But it's interesting too because part of it was this guy. It was the chairs were a part of a dining room set, so they're still kind of like that. And this is set in 1923,
like early.
So that's like hot off, like months off of the original Russian Revolution. Stalin's in charge, so we're in full swing communist Russia. So for historical background, a lot of people who were wealthy aristocrats had their wealth forcefully repossessed by the Russian government, including furniture, like literally anything. And so all of these chairs were sold off. And that's why like they're kind of on this wild goose chase, and why the chairs and the jewelry, besides the money, are so important to the aristocrat. He's trying to get some semblance of what Imperial Russia was like back.
Right. And that's what's great that's why I really wanted you to see it, because you are that, like, you know a lot about Russian literature and history. So
when they brought up the Anna Karenina, I'm like, yes. Anyways.
Or even the philosopher that he references when he's like faking a seizure. Like that scene is brilliant.
Yeah.
Just a great symbolic scene. For,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. No, go on.
Going wrong, I still love the movie. It's just that was the one thing I wasn't a huge fan of, is like I feel like the character who has the most important reason to find the jewels and find the chair is the one who does not do anything for the plot and actively hinders it at one point. Because he's like they get like these 200 rubles each, so the con artist is like, yeah, I'm gonna save these for the auction so we can buy the chairs. And the aristocrat tries to date a woman who's significantly younger than him and already married, and spends all of his money and gets drunk, and then doesn't have the money. It's like, what is your goal here?
I do think, and I read a really interesting review by Roger Ebert, the great Roger Ebert, who made a point that really made me think about, because when I watched this movie for the first time, it was one of my first Mel Brookses, and it was so stylistically different from every other Mel Brooks. Because here's the thing, I think it focuses on a specific theme, and that is honor among thieves. What I find so interesting about this movie, kind of looking back on it, is because of that dynamic, the aristocrat is, in my opinion, very unfamiliar with thievery.
Kind of his whole arc is letting go of that aristocrat and like being able to survive.
Because he is so driven by greed. He is so inherently driven by greed, not necessarily thievery. But that when it comes to money, he just goes for money. This other guy is less so interested in money. In fact, in the beginning, he's shown as more of like a schmoozy, like ladies' man than he is an actual like like real big pickpocket, but he is.
He's a Flynn Rider.
Right, but yeah, right, but he's so into what it is to be a thief that he knows the linguistics. It's two people who can't properly communicate because one has an idea of what to do, while the other one is so invested in himself. Yeah. It really is the idea that despite two people technically being thieves trying to steal the same thing, there's a question about honor there, which I think is what is symbolic about Dom DeLuise's character. Because you have the idea of these two people who are so greedy, but all they want is the money. They're not lying about what they want is the money. Then you have Dom DeLuise, who's trying to like hide all of this with a sort of Christian angle, with the idea that like he is literally a corrupt priest who is so much of a thief and so dishonorable that he's not even honest about what he's stealing.
Didn't he try to kill himself?
A couple times.
a couple times, yeah.
But I do think more than most Mel Brooks movies, I do think the jokes here, with the exception of, like, this is why I think those three are maybe my favorites, Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles has the racial allegory. But there are jokes in that I think are just meant to be silly, which I like. I like silly jokes as much as the next guy. Young Frankenstein has some of those, is at the end of the day trying to tell more of a story, less emphasis put on the theme, more in just telling the story with as many visual jokes going on as possible. This movie feels like it's driven mostly on its theme. Everything that happens is relating to that later theme of like honor among thieves. And to me, that's what I appreciated of it. And that's why I particularly like the ending.
Yeah, because they just nod to each other. They don't really have a verbal exchange, but I feel like ties back to that lack of communication there, but at the same time, they're still like communicating.
They lose the treasure at the end, but what they've inherited is that honor among thieves energy, where it's not technically a happy ending, but it's the ending that basically says cycle continues, you idiot. Like, just keep, like, you know, you've dug yourself this far, keep digging.
That's very much a theme that is constantly in Russian literature. Like, like Dostoevsky, hello. Like, it's very much, I mean, that's the guy who wrote Crime and Punishment, you know, that pretentious book, you know, like the emo teenagers read, that pretentious book. But it's very much of a, well, all right. Like,
I see all those AO3s about Crime and Punishment nowadays, you know.
I wish you guys could see my face right now.
This is an Andrea Knapp call-out post.
I'm sorry, it was COVID. Anyway, I outed myself there. But like, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, its beginning line is, every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That's not verbatim, but it's pretty much like pretty that. Close, yeah. Pretty close. And it's just kind of a, oh well. And like, that entire novel of Anna Karenina is about a bunch of these other marital affairs that people have, but then you have like that other marital affair with Anna Karenina and like this high-ranking dude, but then you got like the young love with Kitty and Russian name I cannot pronounce. And like, their contrasts at the end of the book is just like, we're unhappy still. Yay!
Watch out for the worst.
Yeah. And so that's what I did appreciate about this movie, is it felt like something straight out of Russian literature of the time.
It's a love letter. It really is.
It really was. It felt very like there was a deep appreciation of this style here that translated very well onto the screen. And that's even if the plot annoyed me at some points, which I've already said why, I still felt the appreciation.
Right. Speaking of love and appreciation, Young Frankenstein.
Yay!
Which is your favorite and very close to being mine. This is a movie that, to me, and I think it was really interesting, we had a very long and lengthy debate about Frankenstein and the story of Frankenstein.
Yes.
And how each of our appreciations for it is different, but yet we still are kind of united by some same ideas. For example, you're really into the specific novel of Mary Shelley, which I to be fair, have never read. But you kind of view Frankenstein in that lens, where you're familiar with him as that story. For me, I mostly am knowledgeable about Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster
in the Universal
monster movies, specifically James Whale's work on Bride of Frankenstein and that sort of thing. But you could say whatever you want about those two ideas. They are different. However, I do think they're united by a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
For example, the idea of it largely being a humanist story.
Frankenstein is a product of the Romanticism era in literature.
Right.
Call out Mr. Roosh. I know I'm making you proud right now. But it's very much it's a product of Romanticism, which is the idea. It's humanism in a way. It's the idea that humans are fundamentally good, but it's basically the nature over nurture debate. But like society ultimately causes the corruption and the greediness that you see in humanity. So Frankenstein, or the creature, because Frankenstein's the doctor, I'm gonna be that person.
Hey guys. Wow, you showed him.
Because the creature, when he is first created, is like an infant, and then he's a very altruistic character in the beginning, but then ultimately, because he is shunned and abused by society so much, he vows vengeance on the person who created him. Which, in the original, this is, I think, one of the biggest differences, because the same themes are still there, but they're expressed really differently. Because in the novel, the creature is incredibly educated. He often quotes Paradise Lost and a couple other, and he quotes Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner very often, and he's a very scholarly and philosophical character. And you don't quite get that in Universal. And that's like, I want to open the floor to you there, Gavin. That I feel like that's a very interesting change to make, because you're taking a very intelligent and the philosophical, I guess, theme bait of the entire novel and then making him Russ. Like, why do you think they would choose, as a director, why do you think they choose to do that?
So there's a couple ways of looking at that. I do think more than most of the period, James Whale is very much someone who does like this character. You can tell that he has affection for this.
There's still a great respect for it, absolutely.
Right. Is the scene with the girl in the book?
Yes. Where he saves the drowning girl?
Where he said yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the thing is, when he saves her in the book?
Yes. And then the father shoots him.
Okay.
And that's like in the book, that's his literal, he just got kicked out by, like in the novel, Frankenstein shoos him away, and then he ends up living in this little hovel or shed outside of this family's farm called the DeLacy family. And he basically learns everything by watching them. So the DeLacy father is blind. Yeah, this seems to sound real familiar. The DeLacy father is blind.
Rest in peace, Gene Hack.
So he goes in to meet, and because the DeLacy father's blind, he can't see him, so the father thinks he's just like a normal person. So they're talking, he's like, hey, I've been helping you guys, like, I've been shoveling snow for you and gathering firewood. Can I, like, hang out with you guys? And he's like, sure! And then the children come in, and they scream and freak out and, like, shoo him away, and he's, like, on his way back to society, and then he sees the young girl, tries to save her, and gets shot, which is just, like, the termites on the cake. Right. For this poor guy.
I do think the way that the movies portray him as more of like a monster does two purposes. One, it will, to be honest, it does make him more iconic in the lexicon of.
It does. It really does.
But I think it has a different, at least the way I saw it when I was a kid, I always saw it as, oh, so he's, no matter what you could say about him, he is different from people. He is. But he's misunderstood and still wants to be. I always saw it kind of as a Pinocchio thing. Mm-hmm. And this is my personal view on it, how I've always looked at it. I always saw it as he was like Pinocchio. He wanted to be a real boy. He wanted to be real and wanted to understand the world around him, but no one gave him the chance to. The idea that life itself is kind of something that can be taken away as long as you give it a chance, which I think is what I personally got out of the original. But moving on to Young Frankenstein, what I think is interesting specifically in that regards is I do think as a character, it works a lot with the original movie. It has a, that's why I say it's like the best adaptation, because it has a very seamless blend of the original Universal and the original Mary Shelley while being completely respectful to both. Right, and I do think if it does have one great element, it's that it has my favorite version of Dr. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein in this case. Because, here's the thing, the element of human, right, and this is my personal thing, whenever I look at Dr. Frankenstein, I'm more interested by the creature, not the doctor as much. I'm personally less interested by the doctor as a character. I've always been more fascinated by the creature.
You're supposed to, I think, at least in the original.
But but Young Frankenstein does something interesting, where I'd argue the movie humanizes Dr. Frankenstein in an interesting way.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite scenes in any comedy from the 70s is the scene where he's giving the speech at the college, where his preservation of life monologue is, okay, so he's kind of talking about his father, Dr. Frankenstein. And then he goes on and says, my father's work was doo-doo. And he's talking about how he's not interested in what his father was having. He was interested in the preservation of life.
Sorry, real quick, Gavin. For context for our viewers, in Young Frankenstein, the Dr. Victor Frankenstein already existed, already did his life's work, and Young Frankenstein is like his grandson. They're different doctors. That's just what I wanted to preface for people who haven't seen it.
Right, thank you. I think the title probably gives him some of that.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. But I do think when he talks about that, it is a comment on the original. It's more of a comment of the idea.
Absolutely.
But it's that idea, and I think actually Young Frankenstein is maybe a little foreboding in the way that, like, it is about the idea of people who are in it for a good message, who want to actually, like, they are interested in that preservation of life, but still end up falling into the same sort of trap, which I think is really interesting in terms of the way it works and that the sort of the way it goes. And on top of all of it, it's pretty funny.
It's really funny. Igor is amazing.
Yeah, he's great. All right, so Igor, all right, so this is where I think we should talk about specifically the Hogan's Alley, if you will, of great Mel Brooks performers, particularly the great Marty Brennan, who is hysterical.
It drives. I mean, I love Gene Wilder, don't get me wrong, but man,
but him with Marty, man,
I love it. It's just, it's a subtle kind of comedy. It's not like the slapstick Three Stooges, the 12 Chairs. It's just him making a funny face in the frame, or breaking the fourth wall, or doing just something weird.
He's kind of like Chaplin.
Yeah, he's a very Chaplin character.
Right.
Yeah,
right. I love him. But there's another one who I think is even more important, who I feel as if is maybe the MVP of every Mel Brooks movie she's in. And that is the brilliant late Madeline Kahn.
Yes!
Who is a goddess. I love her.
Yeah.
She's brilliant, amazing. Blazing Saddles. You seen her in Blazing Saddles?
Yeah, I've seen parts of it.
She has the ability of, here's the thing, you watch a Mel Brooks movie and oftentimes you're kind of left in a certain idea of where it's going, who's going to be. She shatters any sort of gender barrier that some of his more raunchy movies would have, because she just demolishes any sort of other screen presence that she is anywhere close to. And I love her in movies like What's Up, Doc by Peter Bogdanovich.
What's up, Doc? Sorry.
What's cooking? What's up, Doc? But I love her work, and especially in Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles, she's brilliant. I love her. So I guess kind of tracking other Mel Brooks movies. Have you seen any of his others that we haven't mentioned yet? Because I've seen every single one of his movies with the exception of one.
What's your exception?
Dracula Dead and Loving It.
I'm not. Me of all people should have seen that, but I have not seen it.
Do you know who plays Dracula in that?
Oh no, who?
Leslie Nielsen.
Okay, I need to see this.
I gotta see that. That's his last movie. That was the last movie. But I've seen Life Stinks, which is really interesting. Life Stinks is a movie that I watched recently for this podcast, which I don't have a lot to say on. It's not great, but it's interesting because I would argue it's his take on a Frank Capra movie. Okay, so it's not a parody. It's more of it's his attempt at kind of drama, which it doesn't really work. It has a lot of visual
that
comedy.
Does not seem like it would work.
Well, it's still a comedy, but it has more emotional moments,
okay.
Right? And those are fine, but I'm really here for the jokes.
Yeah.
So the movie is about Mel Brooks plays a millionaire who's like a big business. He's like, I'm going to take the rundown part of LA and make it into a super conglomerate. And they're like, when Jeffrey Tambor comes in, he's like, well, you can have it, but you've got to stay out there for 30 days. He makes a bet. Like, you couldn't survive out there for 30 days. He's like, oh, I can't? Watch me. And so it's every joke you think they're gonna tell. It's
Okay.
kind of cute, but it's not as greatest, but there's some fun stuff in there. There's a couple of jokes. I do think the opening shot is great because it's him basically going up the building, and it's an entire opening credits that are shot from his feet. So it's like you see the boots marching.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like there's someone wiping the floor who just he goes and you just see the foot move a little. It's funny. It's got some good visual jokes, but it's not his best.
Yeah. Oh, question. At what point did he start like making his appearance in all of his films? What point was that? Because he wasn't in 12 Chairs.
He was in 12 well, he was in 12 Chairs.
He was in 12 Chairs. Who was he in 12 Chairs?
He was the guy with the broom. He was the guy with the broom who was kind of like joking around. I forget the name of the guy. He was near the beginning.
Oh, that I did not recognize him.
That was him, yeah.
Oh.
He was good. No, he was there for a little bit, but
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Anyways, I guess that defeats that question then. Because I was like, he wasn't in that. Yes, he was. I stand corrected.
He always had cameo appearances. Like, for example, Blazing Saddles, he has a very poorly aged cameo in Blazing Saddles. But whatever. Moving past that, I do think it's actually a really good segue because this period of his work right after the big boys, which are Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles, I find very interesting because you have films like Silent Movie, which is a silent movie.
Wow.
Wow. But it stars Mel Brooks, Marty Brennan, and Dom DeLuise, the goats, if you will.
Nice.
And they're basically just movie producers trying to make a movie. And I swear to God, the movie is just like a weird like get together. Literally, the premise of the movie is basically watch Mel Brooks and friends just joke around with their celebrity friends for a little bit.
That sounds great.
There's a scene where they're like, hey, we got to get Paul Newman for our movie. So they call up Paul Newman and they go to like a retirement place, and Paul Newman's like in a wheelchair, and he's like, ugh. So it becomes like a stop motion like race to where they're just like racing each other, like trying to chase each other with wheelchairs. It's the weirdest, most bizarre movie, but it is notable for one joke, and it's like one of probably my favorite joke in his entire filmography. The whole movie is shot in silent, right? So it's like title cards and everything. Yeah. Dialogue. There's only one spoken line in the whole movie, and it's from a mime.
Nice.
And he answers the phone and just goes, no, and then just leaves. And that's a great bit. I love that bit. It caught me by surprise when I first saw it.
I will say, Mel Brooks is one of the great directors you can carry a bit and carry it well. Because there's sometimes I will watch a comedy. Absolutely. There's sometimes I'll watch a comedy and they keep the bit and I'm like, all right, we get it. Mel Brooks, man, he can keep that bit going and I will still laugh. Because
Young Frankenstein is all about that patient type of humor. Young Frankenstein is very patient.
It's very patient
about it. But so that one, and then right afterwards, maybe his most interesting work, which is High Anxiety.
I have not
seen AKA The Story of My Life. But yeah, High Anxiety.
AKA, yeah.
So High Anxiety is a parody, and it's weird, a parody of Hitchcock movies that he asked Hitchcock about. And so Hitchcock kind of like collaborated with Mel Brooks weirdly on it. Here's the thing. There's a lot of reviews at the time that I would agree with that have the problem of, take a Western. You can make jokes about a Western and parody Westerns. The problem with doing a parody of Hitchcock movies is that Hitchcock movies are already parodies of Hitchcock movies.
Yeah.
They're so funny already that it's harder to make it funnier than it is.
Yeah.
For example, there's one joke, and it's one of my favorite Mel Brooks stories. Hitchcock had the idea for a joke. It never made it in, but it literally sounds like a joke from a Hitchcock movie. Hitchcock went to Mel and was like, I have a joke for you.
That is a great impression.
Good evening. I have a little joke.
Good evening.
Good evening. So this is his joke. A character is on the run from a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
They're chased, and then the character leaps onto a boat. He sees a boat that's going one way, right? He's like, oh my God, the boat is leaving. I'm gonna get on that boat so I can escape the bad guy. So he jumps on the boat, and he's like, yes, I'm on the boat. The boat is coming inshore. And it wasn't included because it was too expensive to shoot.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
It's a great joke, but because that's the thing. Hitchcock
I've seen that like a Looney Tunes cartoon before.
Right,
yeah, it's the one where like this dog's trying to dig out of prison and he escapes in the TV and the TV goes right back to the warden's office.
That's Tex Avery. Spellbound. That's a great short. But But that joke is very much prevalent. The idea Hitchcock already is very funny. So for Mel Brooks to make and it is loving, of course.
Yeah,
But
everything he
it's
does
hard
is.
for but it's hard for him to make a movie funnier than a Hitchcock movie. It's tough.
I mean, it does make sense because, like, you've already parodied all the great genres, all the great directors. Hitchcock's kind of just next in the lineup. Like,
Obviously.
it makes sense, but you're right, it's kind of hard to top.
Right.
that.
And then we have History of the World Part 1, as we've previously described. Do you know how they got the title for that?
No.
So Mel Brooks, I'm probably botching this story. Mel Brooks was on a lot, and someone went, "Hey Mel, what's the title of your next movie?" And out of frustration, was like, "How about History of the World? We're gonna do everything. We're gonna do everything. Part
Okay,
1.
Yes. Great.
Part 1.
Slap it on.
Okay.
History of the World, the t-shirt. Boom, there we go.
Okay, this movie. Okay.
Hmm.
I got a lot of thoughts. There's so okay. This is the test. If you like this movie,
It's bonkers.
you're gonna like Mel Brooks. It's pretty
bonkers.
bonkers. There's a lot. Okay, so here's the slow spots for me. I think opening has some great bits. I think the 15 commandments joke is really funny. That one kills me every time.
Yeah.
Everything at the forum where it's like him trying to get a job working for Caesar. Some really good jokes there. Inquisition scene is an all-timer. That's a brilliant just bit.
Yeah, no one expects it.
Honestly, I think the French Revolution, like him as the king, it's kind of Like, I don't know.
I mean, the French Revolution's kind of a joke already.
Yeah, but I mean, like his
Yeah.
whole "it's good to be the king." There's some funny jokes. I think the joke where he's shooting, like he's playing, like
Yeah.
he just he just shoots a person. Like, well,
Well,
breaks.
what are they gonna do? Revolt?
I love that, but it's all right. What do you think of History of the World Part 1?
I mean, as a history fan, yes.
Yeah.
It basically takes anyone who's read anything about history naturally comes up with those jokes, and he just said bet.
He said, "Here, well, let's just write all those jokes." I'm like, you know what? Good on him.
Good on
Spaceballs. I have one thing to say. I have this to say about Spaceballs. Did you know it's actually a remake of a movie, not a Star Wars movie? So, 1935. I think it's 1935. Frank Capra's "It Happened One Night." Have you ever seen this movie?
I've heard this story. Continue for our viewers.
This is new for our viewers. So it's a classic romantic comedy where Claudia Colbert is about to get married, and he doesn't want to get married, and she ends up just seeing someone, and just kind of, just says, "Okay, let's jump in, and just jump in and let's get out of here." So they run away and they fall in love. Spaceballs starts in the exact same way.
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting.
Have you heard the story about the main character in Indiana Jones? Or not? I just gave away the whole story. Basically, George Lucas said, "You could do whatever you want, because I know you're doing Sound of Love, but you cannot have Han Solo." So he goes, "Bet, Indiana Jones."
Brilliant. I love that.
Brilliant.
And last thing I'll say about Spaceballs is one of the greatest performances of all time is Rick Moranis in that movie.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What's the matter, Sanders? Chicken?
I will say, we already talked about horror movies. We already talked about our favorite gory kills. Pizza the Hut.
Pizza the Hut.
I don't know why.
Disgusting.
Get him off the screen.
Disgusting.
I'm done. I don't like it. I don't like it.
You know what? Good on Mel. He's our new Robert Eggers, just pushing horror to a new extreme. Get Coraline for get
Coraline for go, yeah.
Get Coraline on the phone. I got your new muse. I got it right there. So that's our thoughts on Mel. What did we learn today?
What have we learned?
Not much. Like any good Mel Brooks, not much.
I guess the main takeaway from Mel Brooks is, I guess it really shows the genius of comedy, because he's a guy who really does have a deep and loving respect of everything he chooses to parody. And that's why I feel a parody should be done. And good on him. So I feel like comedy, kind of like with the horror, comedy is often brushed off by any sort of awards. So it's something a lot of young filmmakers tend to shy away from.
Interestingly, though, his Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein got screenplay nominations.
They did. But they just got screenplay. But I feel like just in general, film students and other people try to shy away from comedy. It is the hardest to write, but also there's this kind of, you don't feel like you're going to get recognition, but Mel Brooks goes to show, write what you want, and you go for it.
He's a
Within
good
reason,
filmmaker.
but you
Yeah,
go for it.
within reason. My last thought is Mel Brooks thoroughly, as we all know he's funny. We're not gonna like sit here and tell you he's not funny. He's one of the greatest, but as a filmmaker, I feel like he's really underappreciated, and I
Hmm.
think you could see that love in every frame. Like he really does. You get a good Mel
Absolutely.
Brooks movie, one of his golden age ones, you got a really talented filmmaker there,
Hmm.
and that's Mel Brooks. So what are we doing next time, Andrea?
So we tackled one of Gavin's favorite directors, and now we're gonna tackle one of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan.
Who's that guy? I've never heard of this Christopher Nolan fellow.
I don't know.
What do you do?
I don't know. Did he direct Barbie? I don't know.
Mm,
Or was it
was
the
that
other? Was it the other one? It was,
Oppenheimer? What was that?
I don't know.
Kind of a
But
flop. Not Hollywood,
um,
famous Hollywood bomb. You know
yeah,
what I'm talking about.
yeah. Just
But
bombed the Oscars, you know.
right,
But
but you are a fan of him, I
I
assume.
am indeed a fan. When I was getting into film school, the entire interview that I had to do to get my little scholarship to go to study film was a huge rant about Christopher Nolan. And he's one of my favorite directors. But a lot of people aren't big fans of Christopher Nolan.
Including me, who I don't
Yeah.
hate him, which I'll make this clear so I don't regret this next episode, like I did earlier this one.
The
I
apology,
like
part two.
I I like Christopher Nolan. I do. I actually like Christopher Nolan, but I'm not the biggest fan
You're not
of
the
him.
biggest.
In the sense that I will watch his movies because I like to see a good movie, but when it comes to some of his movies, I feel a little less sure of how I feel about him.
Mhm.
I'm more iffy on him than I am about most. And that is a discussion that we'll be talking about
Yes.
next time.
Next time, the Christopher Nolan debate stays st You wanna start talking now? I can't talk.
Okay, so that's it. May the Schwartz be with
May the Schwartz be with
you.
you.